If we want to try and prevent the onset of new episodes of mental illness or potentially even new mental illness, one of the key things that we approach is a kind of selective or indicated prevention techniques. And we usually focus these on such things as low levels of symptoms or certain key risk factors. However, the rest of medicine has moved on and uses algorithms based around a whole range of combined risk factors, and these are widespread in such things as cardiovascular disease, such that you end up with dashboards that clinicians use to actually target their interventions. We wanted to see if we could use this approach for mental ill health, and as part of the Well at Work programme funded by Beyond Blue and Movember, we're looking at how we can identify people with high levels of risk in an employed population to see if we can actually target those for our interventions to prevent new onset mental illness in an employed population. So we used the HILDA data set, a large nationally representative data set, population based in Australia with thousands of people about whom we know hundreds of things. What we did is we took those people who were well, we used a cut-off on the SF36 mental component summary score. We took those people who were well at time 1, we followed them up over a year within this data set to evaluate who became unwell at time 2. We followed the tripod recommendations for developing a risk algorithm by splitting the data set into a training data set and a validation data set. We identified many individual risk factors for the new onset of mental disorder, and then we used a whole set of statistical techniques to reduce those items down to produce a model that could predict the risk for different individuals for the development of a new onset of mental illness. What you can see from these graphs here is that actually the risk of a new onset of mental illness, and on the right hand side you've got the risk, which for men, for instance, for well over half the population, the risk is only about 5% over the following year. The risk is highly concentrated in that group of people, the last 2 or 3 centiles of the population, though 20% of the people carry the vast majority of the risk of a new onset of disorder. So we can look at identifying, providing people with their own risk profiles. So what does this mean in practice? Well, here's an example of what it looks like in practice and how one might be able to think about risk reduction. So here we have a couple of examples of people with only a moderate level of risk, showing some of the risk factors that were actually important for them. Key things such as feeling your life is out of control, what your background is, what your age is, but a whole sense of modifiable things such as the level of exercise, the amount of alcohol you drink, your own health, satisfaction with life, and various other things that we can actually target. And what this shows here is that by simple interventions, we may actually be able to reduce people's risk by between 5 or 10%, even in this moderate group. If we look at those people with very high levels of risk, we can actually reduce their risk maybe by 20 or 30%. And we're going to be testing this in our new interventions within the Well at Work programme.